Hi, it's Warren Huart. Hope you're doing marvelously well. So I get this question asked more often than any other question, whether it be Facebook, email, you name it. People hit me up with this question continuously. And they're like, Warren, how do we make money? How do we make a living in the music industry? It's a huge answer because obviously the industry has morphed and changed so dramatically from its roots in the rock and roll of the 50s until now where we are here in the late 2000s. Things have changed so much, but there are still opportunities and ways of making money. We just have to adapt to the way the markets are changing, and they're changing so dramatically. When I first started off in the early mid-90s, it was such a different industry. Labels were going out there finding artists that they found exciting, new, and interesting. They weren't choosing them based off all of the criteria we have now, because their job was to take an artist, whether it be a solo artist or a band, take them from obscurity and present them to the world. So they would find ways of recording that artist and then marketing and promoting that artist to the masses. These days, that has gone, because these days, the kind of artists that sell bucket loads of records were very, very different from the ones of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and maybe the early 2000s. They're not chosen just on their ability to make great music. They're chosen on the ability to connect with a popular audience. What I mean is, it used to be that you could be an indie rock band. You could be something quite left of center and find, in record sales alone, an audience to get a gold record. In the mid-90s, there was tons of artists that made really cool, independent sounding records that were very edgy and different. All they needed was a hit song. There's a band I know quite well called Better Than Ezra. I know the singer, Kevin Griffin, very well, and they had a hit in the 90s with a song called Good. And I believe they sold about 2 million albums based off that one hit song. There's been a lot of artists in the mid-90s that would do that. They would have a hit song, and then people would go out and buy 1 or 2 million records. It was a very controlled industry where if you wanted that song, you went and bought the album. So you went and spent $13, $14, $15, $16, $17.99 to buy albums to get that song. And that was the way the industry made huge amounts of money from massive CD sales all the way through the 90s up until the very early 2000s. In fact, I believe 99 and 2000 were the best years ever. And even by 2003 or 4, the decline had happened, but it still was a massive spike in CD sales. What's important to know is that is actually a modern phenomenon. If you look at the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and even the 80s, album sales weren't that massive, believe it or not. In the 90s, album sales through CDs just skyrocketed. Couple of reasons. People were going back and buying their old catalogs. I did it. I had all vinyl collection of, the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin and Hendrix and Queen, my favorite band. And I went back and I bought them all again on CD. CD sales just blossomed because people were buying their back catalogs again to have in digital, and they were buying new artists. So it was a wonderful time for the industry. They made billions and billions of dollars off of CD sales. So we have that spike now of like 99 and 2000 where it's peaking like crazy. But we also have Napster and all the other things that came in that were kicking the butt of the traditional industry. But I believe in the late 90s and early 2000s, they weren't hurting the industry as much as you would think. They were actually helping promote artists. Many artists and bands actually would put their song out for free the week before they put it up on sale, just to create a buzz. It was a great marketing ploy. So initially, having a free digital medium was a great way to market your song to many, many people. And in some ways, it still is a good idea to give your fans access to your music, to your merchandise for free, because that brings them in. It makes them feel valued. It's very, very important. I've had several record deals, both in England and in America. I had 2 in England and I had 2 in America. And each time I got signed, we got a decent size of an advance, which allowed us to make a very expensive record with a well-known producer and have it mixed by a famous mixer, and then the label would spend money promoting the song. We'd make videos that cost tens of thousands of dollars that you can now do with a friend and an HD camera. It was a very, very different world in the 90s and the early 2000s. And in some ways, it was wasteful. now with the technology we have available, we can make amazing recordings at a fraction of the cost. And the great thing is we can make amazing videos, we can create our own content, which leads me to how are the ways that we can make money. So label deals still exist. They still exist for many artists. But the kind of artists that major labels, not necessarily independent, specialized labels, they're going to be looking at mainstream artists. So those deals still exist. But those mainstream artists need a mainstream appeal. So it's just important to know if we're going to play that game and want to be signed by a major, then you have to, give in to those kind of criteria. You have to appeal to a lot of people. The kind of acts that are selling lots of records, looking at Wikipedia in front of me here, last year alone was, of course, Adele enormously and Drake. They both sold millions and millions of records. But both of them I would consider to be exceptions to the rule. The other 99% of artists that sold records were very, very pop orientated. And I'm not here to say that's good or bad. My taste in music extends from ABBA to Frank Zappa, from A to Z, A to Z for the English people. Everything in between. There's only two types of music, good and bad, and there's all kinds of genres. But for major labels, they're going to always, mainly, not always, but most of the time, veer towards pop-orientated mainstream artists that can appeal to a large group of people, that have a more popular kind of genre. That shouldn't preclude us from trying to write songs that can get on the radio. Don't get me wrong, we'll get to that later. Songwriting is incredibly important. Great production is incredibly important. However, if you're going to want to be on a major label, you need to do those things. You need to have an appeal to a mass audience, which means songs that you can sing along with, whether it be as something as cool and cutting edge as Royals by Lorde or Niles Barkley Crazy, or something more mainstream like a Taylor Swift song. Whatever it might be, there is ways to make songs that sound unique. The bar is high. You need to write and produce Royals. You need a song that great that it's going to stand head and shoulders above all of the generic kind of 6/4-1-5 pop progressions. You need something that goes against the grain and makes people think, wow, what's that? You need a song like a Gorillaz song, like Clint Eastwood or something like that. I mean, when that first came out, it sounded so different to what was on the radio. I loved it. But there's also rock tracks that do it as well. It's a bar that's very high. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's something that we all want. If you do get into major label world, then be prepared. The major label world is going to be a 360 deal. What does a 360 deal mean? Well, a 360 deal means that a label is going to take millions of dollars and pump it into you. And in return, they want a piece of everything. Hence, 360, which means they'll want a piece of your merchandising, they'll want a piece of your touring, they'll obviously a piece of your publishing these days, a piece of record sales, a piece of many, many different facets. If you're already relatively successful independently, I'm sure you can get a much bigger piece of the pie than somebody who may have something going on, but is going to take multiple millions to get started. If a major label is offering you a 360 deal, then you should be going to them and saying, what guarantees do I have? Where are you going to put your money? Because if they're going to put money into marketing you in many, many different ways and spending multiple millions of dollars in different ways, then from their perspective, they're going to be like, well, we're going to help you become a famous personality. And with becoming a famous personality, like any of the pop stars that we love or admire, they're able to sell shoes and clothing lines and perfumes and design clothes. I mean, and go on tours and make millions of dollars playing massive shows. And traditionally, a label would only partake in the percentage of record sales. A big percentage, don't get me wrong, but a percentage of record sales. Now, as we talked about earlier, that is a shrinking way to generate income. There are multiple ways now that are expanding and making income, but the traditional way of the record sales is shrinking dramatically. So a label's saying, I'm going to put millions of dollars into promoting you as an artist, and that will create opportunities for you to make money in other areas outside of the traditional way of selling records. Therefore, we want to participate in all areas of your income. Again, you may or may not like that. That is your choice. Depending on your leverage, what you already have going on, you can negotiate a fairer percentage towards yourself for their investment. So, how do independent artists make money? How do independent producers and musicians and engineers and mixers, how do we make money? Number one that I think is really, really important is register your songs. Register your songs with a PRO, a performing rights organization. That's BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, whatever the one is in your country. There's many, many different ones all over the world. PRS, I believe, in the UK. So go and register your songs. And then once they're released, register them with Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange is really important. I get checks from Sound Exchange all the time. And why is Sound Exchange important? Well, Sound Exchange tracks your music in the digital world. It's something that only they do effectively. BMI, ASCAP, all the other PROs, CSAC, are all great companies at tracking radio play, TV, film, all of that. They do it amazingly well. But you need to be registered with Sound Exchange as well, because Sound Exchange will take that fraction of a penny for that song that's being played, in somebody's video, for instance, like a YouTube video. They'll take that fraction of a penny and they'll get it to you. And if that person's getting tens of thousands of views and 100 people are using it, it starts adding up. Sound Exchange is a great way of tracking digital plays. And that can be in all kinds of ways, digital radio, you name it. Sound Exchange is really important. So register your music with Sound Exchange as soon as you release it. As soon as it's out there, get it registered. Now, these days, how do we get people to care about us? That is the number one most important thing. How do we get people to care about us? You can record the world's greatest single, album, whatever it might be, but if nobody knows about you, the only people that are going to buy it are your close friends and your family. Your mom will buy your CD. Maybe she'll buy it 3 times over. I mean, this is great, but how do you get it out there? It's not just sufficient to go and put it up on an online service or a streaming service. Getting it up on Spotify is great. I'm not an anti-Spotify person. I'm actually quite pro-Spotify. Why, you ask? And we're going to get a big debate about it. I'll tell you why, because it is the future. And at the moment, we're scratching the surface and a handful of people comparatively have it. Once the whole world has it, times 100 times more, the incomes will increase dramatically. But more importantly, you can't train kids like my son, who's 10, to go out and buy a CD when there's hardly anywhere to buy a CD, but he can stream the music and listen to it. So this is the future. As much as I try, you can't force people to do things that we used to do. We're in a digital world. You're watching me on YouTube. This is important. YouTube is your friend. If you're an artist and you're trying to promote your new music, get it up on YouTube. Make a video. Make a performance video with one camera. Use your iPhone. Do anything. Do something on YouTube. It's a wonderful way to get people to discover you. The most important thing is do it consistently. I've had a YouTube channel now for 2 years. I'm very blessed to have this YouTube channel, and you've all been so incredibly supportive. But I've grown so fast because I consistently put out material, and I'm always thinking of new ways to help people. So that is what I would suggest as an artist. Record your music, make great music, do lyric videos, do performance videos, get your music out on YouTube. Next up, of course, social media. Develop a social media following. Again, it's consistency. I have a Produce Like a Pro Facebook page, and it does pretty well. It does as well as anybody else that does what I do, and I run it myself. In fact, this is an important sideline that I hadn't planned on talking about, but I'm going to talk about. I have a Produce Like a Pro Facebook page. I have a Produce Like a Pro YouTube page. I have a Warren Huart producer Facebook page. I have my own Facebook page. I have a Produce Like a Pro Twitter. I have my own Twitter. I have Spitfire, my studio Twitter. I have a Spitfire studio. The point is I have a lot of different things that I do. And do you know who does them? Me. I run all my social media pages. I have an Instagram account, which is nearly 40,000 people following it, and I am the one promoting it. I'm the one taking the pictures. I'm the one tweeting on the different Twitter accounts. I'm the one posting on Facebook. I'm the one physically sitting here making the videos. And I'm blessed to do that because the rest of the day, the other 10 hours of the day to 12 hours a day, we're actually making music. At the moment, if you follow my Produce Like a Pro Facebook page, you'll know that I'm actually making an album with a young artist called Jared Horgan, and we've been doing that for 2 weeks. We also had an artist called Lucy, a 3-piece girl group who are amazing, come in and do some work, and we've been working with plenty of other artists, and we've been filming videos, like we did the NRG one, and we've been filming those videos in the morning before working all day. The point is like, we work hard and we hustle because this is the new music industry. It's about, I'm helping people with Produce Like a Pro, but I'm also helping myself, getting myself out there and reminding you that I'm actually a producer. You know, because my full-time job is a producer. I'm not a full-time YouTube guy, but I managed to find time to do that, to help people and to keep the momentum going on my career and show people what I do. Because when I open sessions and demonstrate stuff, it's stuff that I'm recording and working on. It's artists that I've been blessed to work with. Social media is really, really important. And doing it consistently doesn't take a great deal of work. Many, many successful artists do everything themselves. They get their cell phone, they tweet, they Instagram, they're doing it themselves, and they're also a successful artist. I tell artists this all the time. Don't put official after your name, just put your name. People don't want a barrier thinking that we're better than them. I'm no better than you. You are all incredibly valuable people that have talents of your own that you can show off to the world. There's no one person that's better than the other. The experts are the people I run away from. When I see somebody telling me I'm doing it wrong, I'm not interested because that's not the road to success. The road to success is to help each other and to give back and to be part of a community. So take that philosophy in what you do and just create great music. And if you have to give away stuff for free to get people involved, then give it away for free. But social media, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Periscope, somewhat, I think people are still using that. Musically, the artist I'm working with is huge on Musically. All of these different things, you know, Twitter, Facebook, of course, all of these things are a huge way to get yourself out there, and you should utilize them. If you're 11 or 91, you can still use them. It's not an age thing at all. All of these different tools are there to help us get our music out there. Help us as producers, engineers, musicians, artists, mixers, songwriters to get ourselves out there. So utilize them. So how do you make money? You've got your music now digitally all over the place, starting to be used obviously on your own YouTube channel, but how do you get it out beyond that? Well, film and TV licensing is a big one. It is a huge one. Write music that you love, but be aware that honesty is what people really, really gravitate towards. When I hear a vocal and it speaks to me, it's because I believe the guy or the girl that's singing to me. If I hear a rap that speaks to me, it's because I believe the guy or the girl rapping is speaking to me. It's honest, it doesn't sound contrived. And there's something about film and TV music that loves that. There might be a beautiful scene in a love story and something tragic has happened or whatever it might be, and this song comes on and it's really heartfelt, but it's not all earnest. It doesn't have to be a big star. It just tells a lyric and says something in a message that we can identify with, that helps create the mood. These days, ever increasingly, it is not, I'll say it once more, it is not major label artists that are getting used that much. The playing field is level. It is completely leveled. Now, independent artists have as much opportunity to get into film and TV as a major label artist. And in some ways, it's easier. Because if you're a major label artist with a huge record deal and a massive publisher, and maybe an agent and a manager, that's a lot of people to communicate with. A lot. But if you're an independent artist and somebody hears your music on your Facebook page and sends you a message, hey, I love this song. I'm doing a Fox TV show and I'd really like to put this in. We have a $5,000 budget. Are you interested? You can say yes or no within 20 seconds of receiving that message. Now put yourself in an artist on a major label. Major label gets phone call. I heard this song on this album the other day. I really, really like it. They have to get through 3 or 4 different people to get to the person to speak to. Then that person puts them off to somebody else, who then calls somebody else. Before you know it, the publisher's involved. The point is like, I get opportunities, and I'm sure many of you have, and I'd love to see your experiences. I get opportunities that I have to say yes within 24 hours. I have to say yes within 24 hours because they're talking about 2 or 3 different pieces of music. They reach out to somebody. If they don't hear quick enough, they go with the other one. Now, so that makes it very difficult for the bigger artists. And the other thing that's difficult for bigger artists is $5,000 is not a lot of money if you've got a manager, a publisher, a record label, an agent, or whatever it might be. All of these different people involved, they look at it and go, well, that's a lot of work to get a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. If somebody's got $5,000 that they're willing to pay for the use of your song, this is how the money goes. Half of it traditionally goes to the master owner. So if you own it, or the label owns it, whoever might own it, they get half of the money. And if you're a major label artist, you get traditionally 13% of that money. You see how that $5,000 is getting pretty small. So $2,500 goes to the master owner. The other $2,500 is split between the publisher and the writer. As you can see, that $5,000 is becoming quite small. So owning your own music, owning the recording, and having the ability to say yes to any kind of offer is huge. It's really, really huge. As an independent artist, you have a lot of opportunities out there. You're leaner and meaner, and you can move much quicker as a result. So don't let that hold you back. Okay, so we've got film and TV licensing. It's a big deal. There's a whole other 4-hour conversation we could have on that. Be very careful in film and TV licensing. There's a lot of people that just put you into their library and then you'll never ever hear from them ever again. You need a situation where you're going to actively work your music. And you know, having somebody with great contacts is a big deal, but I think ultimately it's still always going to be about the hustle, about getting on music in front of people. I have a publishing and licensing company, and we're always sending out music. It's just a non-stop process of sending out things. And you have to do it a lot. You can't just stick it in a catalog and hope for the best. You really do have to work it very, very hard. So be aware of that. So next up, recording studios. If you're a producer, engineer, mixer, songwriter guy, you're going to want to go to a recording studio. Well, that has changed dramatically. If you're fresh out of music school and you want to get into a recording studio to intern or assist, do it. That's a fantastic thing. But obviously, those are shrinking rapidly. If you watch my channel, you'll see I just did an NRG studio tour. I've done a Sunset Sound one. I've done multiple studios. But you'll notice it's weighed mainly to home studios and personal studios, and studios that musicians are turning into commercial facilities. The traditional, high-level, expensive, been around for decades studio is shrinking rapidly. You know, a room where you go to where they have a full-blown Neve, SSL, API, whatever it is, those huge consoles that we all grew up looking at as being the ultimate, those kind of rooms are disappearing rapidly. Now, they're not going all together, because a lot of what's happening is there are successful or up-and-coming musicians and artists and producers and engineers and mixers that are buying those, and they're creating their own studios. There are new studios up and coming, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of opportunities, but the traditional high-level, multi-room, 3 to 4 consoles, 3 or 4 live room facility is rapidly disappearing. It's difficult because those were traditionally in very, very expensive cities like London, New York, Los Angeles. With those kind of incredible cities goes massively expensive real estate. So if you're a studio owner and you're making $20,000 or $30,000 worth of income a month in these very slow times, but your building is worth $20 million, which is quite likely for a decent sized building in London, New York, or Los Angeles. If your building's worth that much, but your income and your profit after expenses is tens of thousands of dollars after you've paid all your taxes and your staff and everything, you can see why a lot of people are selling up. It's sad but true. It's very difficult for a large recording studio in a massive city like that, one of those cities, to maintain the kind of upkeep and profitability. And if they own their buildings, they're looking at it from a point of view of like, my real estate is worth more than my business. It's sad but true. So those are shrinking. However, they still exist, but the world is moving to the home studio. This is my home studio. I'm blessed. I've been doing this since I was a teenager, and I'm no longer a teenager. So I've been doing this a long time. I've acquired a lot of equipment, but I think for most of us, starting out, to get to this now would be almost impossible. The kind of income that's available, you can make great middle and upper middle class living by working really, really hard in the music industry. I know you can. I've seen many, many people. As I mentioned many times before, I've had 3 assistants that have won Grammys, that have gone on and won Grammys and now have successful careers. So I know from my own personal experience that you can go from intern to Grammy winner to making money. And this has all happened over the last 10 years. So it still exists. It's possible for that to happen. And you can create careers and you can do well. However, there's another factor involved. If I was starting again, honestly, I wouldn't buy a 4000. I would not buy an SSL 4000. I got this a number of years ago, and it was a blessing. I mixed half of the last Aerosmith record on this console here. I don't think Aerosmith would have taken to me if I was mixing it on my laptop. Maybe now, a few years later, maybe they would, but at the time, having a large format SSL was the way that I could guarantee a client would stay with me. The reality is that is changing dramatically. I don't pay lip service to this. It is a fact that if you have a decent quality, large diaphragm condenser, a decent 2-input or even 1-input device these days, and a DAW that you know well, that is royals by Lord. It is. I challenge you to tell me you could not record that on a laptop with a 2-input. Of course it can be done. It's basically a vocal that's layered with the simplest production ever. And that is all about the creativity. So we know this, and I say it all the time, that creativity is king. There's so much that's done now. And a lot of my friends that are successful pop producers and writers are writing and recording on their laptops, and they're making records on it. If you want to get into the pop world, you don't need a huge amount of equipment. Now, you can have a huge amount of equipment because it's fun. Having really, really expensive vintage tube mics is kind of fun, especially when they have a story like, oh yeah, this was used by blah, blah, blah. You know, we love that stuff, but the necessity for it is not there. We all know where the technology is going. Now, we can all debate the technology, but that's not what this is about. This is about how we make money. We can debate the technology, but let's be honest, the mic modeling is drastically improved. The Slate microphone, the Townsend microphone are close enough for jazz, as we used to say as kids. The difference now between a $15,000 vintage mic and a $1,000 multiple emulation mic is so close. We can debate, if you like, on the subtle differences, but they always come down to subtle differences. In all the comments I read, there are always subtle differences. I'm not here to sell microphones. I'm just here to say that we don't need that kind of equipment now. So if you're a young and upcoming producer, engineer, mixer, artist, songwriter, you don't hold yourself back by saying that you need expensive equipment, because you don't. You could buy yourself the most beginner $300 package and then upgrade the microphone in a year or two once you start making a little bit of income, or you've got a side job and you've saved enough money for some slightly better equipment. The fact that all the major plugin manufacturers now offer monthly ways of purchasing is incredible. So you can get an everything bundle for a few dollars a month now and have access to everything. This is a great leveler. It's incredible. The kind of technology that's available is wonderful. So how do you make money? Well, you can start by buying something at the cheapest level and start making music. Get yourself out there. Go back, social media, announce yourself as a producer, a songwriter, an engineer, and a mixer. Put your work up there. Start talking to your friends. Get making music. That's how you get out there. This is a contentious one. I do honestly believe that being musical is going to help you. There is Rick Rubin, who I've worked with years ago. I did pre-production with the Chili Peppers with him. His whole philosophy is he works his bands hard. He does a lot of pre-pro. And what he would do with the Chili Peppers is he'd do like 6 months of pre-pro with them. And he'd work them really hard, and before they went into the studio, the songs were all ready, the arrangements were ready, the keys, everything. The songs were finalized, all the parts. So going into the studio was simply about hiring the best engineer on the planet, a guy like Jim Scott, and recording an amazing record. That was how he makes amazing records. I get it. These days, We're talking about making records, even with some of the biggest guys now, in a matter of a few weeks, and quite often in days. And I'm sure many of you have made albums in a day. You've got a band in a studio, recorded it live and mixed it. We've done everything from 1 day to 2 years. All these things are possible, but increasingly they're becoming over shorter and shorter periods of time. So now, what does that mean? It means that we have to multitask. We need to have to understand how to communicate with musicians, not just on performance, but often we have to pick up their instruments and show them parts. Of course, it's not a necessity to have to play instruments, but would it help you? Yes. Would it help you if you were a songwriter? Yes, because it's another skill set. I grew up as a guitar playing songwriter. I've been writing songs my whole life. I've been blessed to work with so many artists. I've written songs with Josh Radin. I've written songs with Mark Broussard. I've written with some of the best writers and the best singers out there. And that has helped me hone my craft. I've been really, really blessed to work with these artists and to get better and better at what I do. And by doing that, I can now bring that skill set to every artist I work with. And it's not always about rewriting their songs, but it's about understanding their songs. So multitasking is a big, big deal. If you are a producer, an engineer, and a mixer that also can songwrite and play instruments, it's a big deal. I do play every instrument at different levels, don't get me wrong. I'm a really good guitar player, a pretty good bass player, an average keyboard player, and an awful drummer. But I can do all of those things. I can go in there and play the drum part, and editing is my friend, and I can get stuff done. If you're good at any of these things or you want to expand upon it, just start doing it. You know, I didn't play drums 4 or 5 years ago. I started playing drums out of necessity because I couldn't always get the drummer I wanted in the studio when I needed him. So I'd start playing drums. And on several records now, I have played drums on the records. And yes, I'll get better over time, but I love learning. And if you're watching this, I'm sure you love learning too. So develop your skills, increase your skills. It will really help you. As you're developing these skills, you're going to find a lot of other avenues as well. It's not always just about the production. You could also get into film and TV composing. That's outside of just getting your music in film and TV. You could actually compose music. I have done it a few times, and I have friends that are very successful at it. One of my good friends, Chad, does Scandal. He did Private Practice. He does very well in that world. He started off by having theme tune music. So he had music of songs that we use for theme tunes. And then he started writing incidental music. We're going to be talking to him very soon. So there's a whole world of film composing. There's also games. As you know, Mick Gordon did Doom. Mick Gordon is a shredding, incredible guitar player, but he writes music that isn't just guitar. He has programming, and he also uses FL Studio. So there's a guy who's multitasking. He's a great guitar player who's developed his songwriting, production, engineering, mixing skills, and now he's writing music for massive videos. Watch his video. It's really interesting. He tells us a lot about the process. So ultimately, you have many, many ways to make money. You've got all of the traditional ways of record sales, which are dwindling fast. They do exist, but if you are going to sell music traditionally, think outside of the box. Make vinyl. Vinyl doesn't sell millions and millions of copies, but the thing about vinyl, if you're a true fan of a band, you love vinyl because it gives you something tangible. That 12-inch record, that gatefold sleeve, whatever it is, it's beautiful. And people will pay a premium for a 12-inch gatefold sleeve with amazing artwork on it. Many artists have come to realize that. I worked with Jeanette Napolitano a few years ago. She's the singer of Concrete Blonde. And she did this amazing thing, and this is years ago, where she took a 7-inch single, put it in a box. Inside the box actually was like a handwritten note, and she put a bow on it, and then she had a wax seal, which she stamped. And she sold it for a massive premium. I don't remember what it was, $30 or $40. And she said that most of her fans bought 2. They bought 2 because they opened one and played it, and then had one in their collection. Now, think about this for a second. If you sell 100 pieces of vinyl, whether it be a gatefold sleeve, a 7-inch, whatever, if you're selling it at $30 and your profitability is $25 and you sell 100 of them, you can do the math. You sell 1,000 of them, you can do the math. It's a great way to give back to your fans and give them something beautiful, like a 12-inch album with a gatefold sleeve and great artwork and huge photographs, as opposed to a little tiny download thing. It's a great way to give back to your fans, but also make a decent extra set of income. People will buy that on the road. I have bands I work with who sell vinyl on the road by the truckload. They do absolutely wonderfully well. Obviously, t-shirt sales, all of these things are great ways to make income. So as a producer, what kind of money can you earn? I'm sure that's the question you're asking yourself. Well, if you are multi-talented and you can write as well as produce and play instruments, etc., the sky's the limit. However, obviously it's dependent upon success. A guy like Max Martin is typically making about $65,000 to $100,000 a song. And then often he's got artists signed to his roster. You know, there are artists he represents. So he has making money in many different ways. But he's built himself up to that situation. Obviously, he wrote and produced many, many songs over the years and eventually got more and more successful, had big hits, obviously, with Britney Spears early on. And before you know it, he's this massive producer and writer. Don't forget that he is a writer as well as a producer. The traditional rock and roll producer still exists. Of course they do. You know, Rick Rubin still makes records. There's still producers like him out there. But ultimately, the guys and girls that are making the big money are also writer producers. So an artist comes to them, either signed or unsigned, usually signed because they have the budgets, or unsigned if they happen to have enough money. They go and they want a co-written smash hit. Simple as that. They want a radio song. So with that, you can command a large fee, but of course you have to build up a track record. When I first started producing in America, the budgets were around about $30,000 to $70,000 for the producer. So for a 10-song album, you get paid on a major label project, $30,000, $35,000, up to about $70,000 as a producer. And then if the album recouped, you'd get 3 points. And a very successful producer might get 4, but typically it was 3 points, 3 percentage points of the sale. But you'd have to recoup all of the costs. These days, royalties are fairly useless. I mean, I still get royalties on records that I did a few years ago, but they're pretty minimal. They're when an artist like James Blunt, I did a single with James Blunt that was a big hit in Europe. And when he puts out a new album, there's a little blip. And people go back to that album with the singles on and buy that album. So I get a larger royalty check like every 2 or 3 years when he puts out an album. But essentially, most new music that's being made is very unlikely to recoup. If you're going to make albums, unless you make them incredibly cheap, it's very difficult to recoup the cost that goes in it on a traditional label payout system. The way that labels worked is they would give the artist 13% typically. And that 13% was the remainder after packaging deductions. So it may have been $4 or $5, so they got 13% of $4 or $5. However, they recouped the money that was owed on the record at their rate. So the artist was always paying back at their royalty rate. What does that mean? Well, basically that means if the record cost, I say $400,000 to make all in, which is not that unusual back in the mid-late 90s, early 2000s. Records were expensive to make. After all the fees and the studio time and with a famous mixer mixing it, it could up to about $400,000. So it was an expensive process. And then there may have been other promotional costs which the band had to absorb. I mean, there was lots of costs. But let's just say $400,000 or $500,000 was owed. Remember, you're paying back at 13%. So it's not the first $400,000 goes straight to paying that back. No, that's not how it works. 13% of the income that came in from the record sales went back to paying back the debt. The label could make a couple of $1 million of profit, and yet the band will have not recouped. That's why there was a lot of resentment in those days for, you know, the traditional kind of deals. So the way that it worked with producers is you did recoup from record one once everybody had recouped. That's the good thing. For poor old bands, they would recoup at 13%, and once they had recouped that $400,000, then they would start getting paid after those sales. Luckily, most producer deals were from record one, so once they recouped, you get paid for every single album that was sold, not the first few $100,000 that was sold removed to pay the recoup. Basically, it always went back to record one. So that was the good thing about being a producer. However, it's very unlikely, as we've been talking about, that any record will recoup on a major label these days, with only a handful of exceptions. The label will be making money, but it's very unlikely that the artist will be making much money. But if you're a writer on the record, you will get paid. You'll get paid on all of the mechanical sales. Every time the record sells, you'll get a royalty as a writer. You'll get your publishing, you'll get your writer side. However, record sales are low, so that's not a lot. There was a time when albums sold millions and millions of copies that without singles, you still got a nice check. However, now when records are in the sort of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands is like considered huge, those checks for like 1/3 of one album track are pretty small. It's not like it was. You're hoping that your song gets chosen as a single and then it gets pushed by the label. Then you'll see a decent income coming from a good radio hit. That's where it really makes a difference. So definitely as a producer, be aware of that stuff. Writing is a big deal. If you can write, even if you're getting bridges and, you know, smaller percentages, 10, 20, 30% of a song, it's better than not writing at all. It increases your potential income. I really believe in honesty. So if you wrote half a song, you should deserve half a song. If it's written from scratch together, then it's usually 50-50. But if somebody has a completed song and you change it a little bit, you've got to figure out what kind of percentage that should be. If you rewrite their bridge, maybe it's 10 or 20%. You know, if you wrote the chorus, then it's a whole different ballgame. The chorus is like half the song and such a hooky part, then maybe the percentage is a lot bigger. It really depends. It's a lot easier to do when you start from scratch and you write a song together, then you can own the song 50-50. And that's actually a smart way of working because it builds a better relationship with the artist if you are working together and creating a healthy relationship where you do something 50-50. There may be one day where I come in with an idea and my writing partner embellishes it and it becomes a hit. And then the other day they come with an idea and I embellish it. It creates a freedom. Some of the most successful bands like Queen in particular, and I believe U2, split everything publishing-wise equally. It allowed them to flourish and be creative people and be supportive of each other. I think that in a band situation, you have to question what your dynamic is. Sometimes the lead singer writes all the songs, and other times the lead singer writes with the band. It's a dynamic that you need to figure out, but you do need to figure it out as a producer, as an artist, and everything, because it is still a way of making additional revenue above and beyond, you know, putting albums out. Remember, there's a lot that can be said in film and TV licensing. So being a writer is a big deal. So I think as an independent producer, engineer, and mixer now, you need to weigh up all of your situations. If you're going to work with an artist that's quite established, then yes, of course, you can work for a smaller price, maybe for some publishing, you know, maybe as a co-writer on the song. But when you're writing with a young and upcoming writer, it's difficult. Unless you really, really believe in them, you really need to be paid for your time to produce the track. There's a big business in cities like Los Angeles and Nashville, etc., where writer-producers are often doing stuff on spec to get cuts. However, the longer I do this, the more I like to get paid as a producer, and I offer co-writing with it. But I am a producer and I get paid to produce, but I do co-write. I try not to do too many spec writing things because I know the odds now. I know that unless your song is picked as a single and is pushed to radio, it is unlikely you'll make a lot of money out of it. Because unless you got 1/3 of one song on an Adele record, doesn't matter. The album sold 8.5 million copies, the last one, whatever it was, 8-10 million copies. So yes, 1/3 of one song is a big check if it's still only on the album. But if it wasn't a single and the album sold 200,000 copies, it's 1/3 of one song. That check is considerably smaller. And if that's one of only 2 or 3 cuts that you got that year, as we call it, cuts when you get a percentage of a song, if it's only one of 2 or 3, then you're maybe making $10,000 or $20,000, but you might be working 12 or 15-hour days. So it's important to try to get paid in situations where you can as a producer and take the writing as a wonderful opportunity. And I do think that you should hone that craft. It is a way that you can build a catalog of songs. You know, I've got 650 plus songs, maybe more, and I'm growing my catalog. And each day I find new ways of getting those songs cut by other artists. Like most of the stuff in my academy is stuff I've co-written, written, produced. Because I own it, I'm able to present to people so they can use it. So owning your songs, owning material, writing stuff is a big deal. It's the way that you can figure out making money. Now, obviously, the one last thing that we haven't touched upon, I think is important, is teaching. If you're an incredibly skilled musician and you're great at your craft, don't write off teaching. Don't write it off. When I was coming up in England, I played in bands, I had my own band, and I worked in a music store. Also, a couple of evenings a week, I taught guitar. And I'll be honest, it kept me focused. It stopped me from going out every night and partying. I stayed in and played guitar and taught kids and stuff like that. And I made extra money. And I put that straight into the bank. And before you knew it, I'd saved up quite a lot of money. And the thing about teaching that I love, and the reason why I do this stuff for free on YouTube, is it focuses me. Here I am talking about stuff. I've taken notes. I've thought a long time about all the stuff that I want to talk to you about. But teaching and imparting this information is a way of giving back. It's a way of helping people, but it also focuses me. Because I'm talking about this stuff thinking to myself, well, yes, I need to get that song registered. I need to make sure this is up on Sound Exchange. These are the things that I know work, that I'm helping you with, but I'm reminding myself as well. So teaching is a valuable way of doing two things. You can make some money out of it, but it also helps you with your focus. And there's something very rewarding about giving back that is really empowering, because there's nothing better than this incredible community we have. And I love this community on YouTube and how everybody helps each other. And it's mostly positive. And that's what's so great about it. At least around Produce Like a Pro, we keep it really, really positive, and we're all trying to help each other. And that's kind of the bottom line. So getting into the teaching side is an extra income, but it's also a great way to keep yourself focused. And if you are going to make money outside of performing and recording, at least be teaching it, because then you can make some money with your craft. Okay, so thank you ever so much for watching. We have just scratching on the surface of how the music industry has changed and how you make money now. You've got all of the traditional ways, but you have to think outside of the box. With CDs, you want to bring great value to it. Vinyl, even cassettes. I know people in New York that are selling cassettes at shows. People love it. Anything unusual. Then, of course, you've got merchandising. Don't forget Sound Exchange. Sign your music up on a Sound Exchange. You'll get to see a lot more money from digital that way. Then register your song with a PRO. You'll be able to track its plays all over the world. If you get something played in Australia on a TV show, you'll see a residual income from that. Make sure you register your songs with a PRO. There are so many different ways to make money now. If you're an artist or producer, you need to be multitasking. If you're not a musician, learn. Get really amazing at programming, develop your ear, get better and better at your skill set, and you'll open your world up to so many more opportunities. Thank you ever so much for watching. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. I love this kind of discussion. I really hope it's helpful. This is all about giving back and about creating a wonderful community. You are so incredible. I can't believe how fast everything is growing because of how wonderfully supportive you are. Thank you ever so much. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing, and I wish you all the best in your career.